Hey everyone, this is Brian Carroll from Summit for Wellness, and I am going to show you a comparison between the Fenix 3HR and the Fenix 6 in a couple different instances. So I've had the Fenix 6X with the Sapphire glass for almost a month now, and I have been comparing it against the Fenix 3HR to see how much of a difference there has been over the last few years. So in this first instance, this is based off of a run in the neighborhood, and I'm going to show the difference between the two tracks. This is only having the watches on the wrist and no other accessories. So as you can see, mileage was dead on for both of them. The mile times were basically the same. The calories was a little tiny bit different, and we'll see that a little bit later, but you can see there is a difference in the elevation gain. The Fenix 6X is more accurate to the amount of gain that is actually on that track compared to what the Fenix 3HR picked up. So when we look at the map itself, overall, you can see that when you're panned way out, they look pretty similar. If we zoom in to see if there's any differences, you can see that both of them have about the same amount of jumping around compared to the overlay, which is probably why the mileage actually ended up being even. What was interesting about this run is I got to the mile marker about 20 seconds faster on the Fenix 3HR than the Fenix 6X. However, by the end of the run, they had evened out. So we'll go down and you'll see the elevation plots here. Elevation plot, you are noticing, is pretty even overall for the 3HR. And then you do have the climb right over here before the descent the rest of the way. However, on the 6X, you can see the ascent is definitely higher than over on the 3HR. Pace, like I said, they averaged out to be about the same between the two. But the thing that was interesting is the heart rate. So the average heart rate on the 3HR was 149, and then the average heart rate on the 6X was 156. And as you can see, it was showing that my heart rate was started off a little bit higher on the 3HR, but then it didn't really climb as much as it did on the 6X. So over on the 6X, it was in the 30s, and then it started climbing, and then it ended up in the 60s. Whereas the 3HR, it looks like it barely got into the 60s. And for the most part, that's kind of the main differences. We can come down here and see the data a little better on both watches. Heart rate, the average 149, max was 165, whereas the max was 174 over here. Obviously, the 6X is going to have more data because it just has more data fields attached to it. But it is interesting looking at the data here. What I did take from this, with having the heart rate so different between the two, is I then decided at some point I need to use my heart rate strap with the 3HR, because that's supposed to be the most accurate, and see how that compares to the 6X. Because just having these two data points, I did not know which one was more accurate. So that's where I decided on my next time doing that run, I would use a strap on the 3HR and then the 6X. So on this run, the mileage is the same. The average pace is basically the same. Again, the 3HR had a much lower elevation gain than the 6X, and it had a much higher calories burned. Looking again, zoomed out on the tracks, the track looks good. We'll zoom into the point down here on both of them. And the tracks overall look pretty good. Obviously, there's a little bouncing, but not much. We scroll down. The elevation chart is again going to be off because, as we saw before with the 3, it didn't really capture the climb as much as the 6X. And then the heart rate. Overall, the graph is very, very similar to the 6X. And this is with having the strap on. So the average on both of them is 160 beats per minute. This is telling me that the wrist-based heart rate on the 6X is actually a lot more accurate than the 3HR. And it's actually pretty similar to what you would get with having a heart rate strap. There is a little bit more variation in the heart rate strap than the 3HR, but overall it was very similar. Then we can come back down here. We'll look at the average 160 and then the max 176. So they both were pretty spot on with that. I was very impressed by that. So then I wanted to challenge the 2 watches a little bit. I went onto a hiking trail. However, the trail itself was inaccessible because of a road washout. So we ended up walking along a road, but it was still out in the mountains a lot deeper than a city would be, which is going to test the GPS tracking a little bit more. And so that is where I started to notice a lot more difference. With the 3HR, it was about 0.2 miles less than the 6X. As we can see just from panned out on the map, there's a lot more bouncing around of the GPS track on the 3HR than there is on the 6X. There's definitely still some bouncing around with the 6X, but not as much, whereas the 3HR is kind of all over the place. So I would assume if you are on a hiking trail, the 6X is still going to have better GPS tracking than the 3HR did. As we scroll down, elevation plots again, we're seeing a difference between the 3HR and the 6X. And then the heart rates, again, this heart rate did not have a heart rate strap. So you're seeing a lot more inconsistencies with the 3HR compared to the 6X. Then as we go down, max heart rate on the 6X 109, max heart rate on the 3HR is 119, and then all the rest is just added data. We could look at elevation plot, and there is about a 50-foot difference in the elevation gain. So again, I would assume that the 6X is more accurate with that. And comparing it to the maps that I had on my phone, the 6X would be more consistent to what we actually did. So hopefully that gives you a pretty good overview of the differences between the 3HR and the 6X. The technology has definitely improved. The tracks and the GPS is definitely better. The heart rate monitoring on the 6X is definitely better than the 3HR. So let me know if you have made the jump from the 3HR to the 6X or any of the Fenix 6 series. What have you noticed? And do you think it was worth the upgrade price? So let me know in the comments.